Welcome back, everybody, to some more MLB the Show 22 content. In today's video, I have something a little bit different planned. I have compiled a list of 10 players who you need to trade for in your franchise modes. I have specifically picked out 10 players who aren't, insanely good on paper. None of these guys are higher than 85 overall, and none of them have a potential. So it's not like they're superstars or anything, and they're not going to be that hard to get. They're sort of under-the-radar sleeper guys who, on paper, don't have the greatest of ratings, but they always progress well in MLB the Show Sim, and they always put up good stats. And to prove that they're easy to get, we're going to pick the worst ranked team in the entire game, the Oakland Athletics, and trade for all 10 of these players. These players are proven to be good in the MLB the Show Sim by real science.
Science rules.
I have done a 5-year simulation and a 7-year simulation, so all 10 of these players are backed up by real facts that they are actually good in this game. We're going to get 2 starting pitchers, 1 reliever, and 1 player at each of the 7 main positions on the diamond. So catcher, the 4 infield spots, and the 3 outfield spots. We're going to start with starting pitcher here. As I said, we're going to get 2. The first one is Luis Garcia from the Astros. Garcia is the best player on this list for what it's worth. He's an 82 overall. He's only 25 years old. He's going to be a little bit harder to get than the other guys we talk about because he is quite good and not totally under the radar, but he progresses very well in MLB the Show simulation. This is him in the 5-year simulation I did. Just all around consistent numbers. In 4 of the 5 seasons, he had ERAs in the 3s. 1 year, he had one in the 2s. And then this is the 7-year simulation. He is starting to regress at 31 years old, but that's to be expected. But look at his numbers. All around, very consistent. Multiple seasons with a sub-3 ERA. And all around is just a well-rounded guy for your rotation. So as I said, you don't have to trade that much. Sean Manaea and 2 pretty blab prospects will get the job done. I tried to avoid trading away major leaguers just to prove that these players are not hard to get, but Garcia is one of the better ones on the list, and Sean Manaea is a free agent at the end of the season, so it's really not that big of a deal that you'd be losing him in order to get a great player like Garcia. The other starting pitcher I selected is a little bit more under the radar. It's Zach Plesac from the Cleveland Guardians. A general rule of thumb with pitchers in this game is that they have a really good walks per 9, they're probably going to be pretty good in sim, and that is definitely the case here with Zach Plesac. In the 5-year simulation, he really is progressing well. His highest ERA is in the high 3s, so again, never got it in the 4s. And then in the 7-year simulation, he does start to regress quite a bit, but again, at 33 years old, that's to be expected. Super consistent, including a 2.41 ERA season in 2026, and again, never had an ERA higher than the mid to high 3s. So this is somebody who's going to be really good in the middle of your rotation and doesn't cost much. Cole Irvin and a pretty bad prospect will get the job done. So you just got yourselves a really reliable number 2 or number 3 starter for like a number 4 or 5 starter. The reliever I have selected is Jorge Alcala from the Minnesota Twins. Another guy who has a high walks per 9, which is of course the key, and he progresses into a stud in MLB the Show simulation. In the 5-year sim, he goes up to an 89 overall. He did have a few seasons with pretty high ERAs, but his previous season, 2.47 ERA, and as we look at the 7-year simulation, his numbers were filthy. Multiple seasons with a sub-2 ERA, never had an ERA higher than 3.2. That's insane. Jorge Alcala is really good in this game, and he doesn't cost that much. If you trade a C potential pitching prospect who may never play in the major leagues, that can get the job done for somebody who can be a high-end reliever in your bullpen for a long time. Let's now look at the position players, and it was kind of hard to find a catcher because there just aren't many that are great on offense, but Luis Torrens of the Mariners is kind of a sleeper. Along with his bat, his defensive ratings are good enough. He's not a great fielder, but he does have a good arm, which is a big deal, and he progresses well offensively. He's already very good against lefties, and he's certainly solid enough against righties. In the 5-year simulation, his numbers are far from spectacular, but they're certainly not bad. It never seemed like he was really an everyday player in that 5-year simulation, and as we look at the 7-year simulation, again, he only played over 100 games twice. But if you trade for him and make him your everyday catcher, then he's going to put up better numbers than that. And only being a 67 overall, he's not really going to cost you that much. If you trade 37-year-old Stephen Vogt and a pretty bad outfield prospect, that doesn't. So Luis Torrens is certainly a sleeper name to watch out for, especially if you play him often. There were a lot of good choices for first base. I ended up going with Nathaniel Lowe from the Texas Rangers, a big lefty bat who is one of the better players, I would say, on this list. And he's going to be one of the harder guys to get. But he's not that hard, only being a 74 overall at 26 years old. In the 2 simulations I done, he developed into a beast. The previous season of the 5-year sim, he hit 33 dingers while hitting 324 with an OPS hovering around 1,000. Here in the 7-year simulation, he wasn't too bad either. He's also very durable. He will play every day for you. And with that, along with his elite production of power and contact, along with pretty good defense, you're really getting the full package with Nate Lowe from the Rangers. So again, he's going to be a little bit harder to get. We did have to throw in Austin Allen, who's a decent catcher. But overall, it's worth it if you're getting a 26-year-old bat who can be a beast for you in the middle of your lineup like Nate Lowe. So we're going to make that trade here and add Lowe to the team. The second baseman I picked isn't really an under-the-radar guy because I think a lot of people who have experience with MLB the Show Sim know how good Luis Arraez is. But if you're not familiar with this game, Luis Arraez always develops into a beast. He's only a 70 overall, but in the 2 long-term sims I did, he was very good. In the 5-year sim, he goes up to an 83 overall. His power numbers won't wow you, but he's a great contact hitter, somebody you can have leading off for you at the top of your order, and he's a good defensive player as well. You can develop his power numbers quite a bit. Here in the 7-year simulation, he had seasons with 20 home runs, 23 home runs in the previous season, but you're getting Arraez to hit at the top of your lineup, and if you can develop his power to be a 20-plus home run per game guy, that's sort of just an extra cherry on the top. Only being 24 years old, again, he is a little bit harder to get, but neither of the players we traded are really all that good. We did send away a B potential shortstop, but he's only a 58 overall. And with the Athletics, they already have 2 great shortstop prospects with Robert Poisson and Logan Davidson, so he is not really needed. And now we're getting someone who could be at the top of the order for 7-8 years. The third baseman I have selected is J.D. Davis from the Mets, who technically isn't even their starter because they have Eduardo Escobar, and Davis also probably isn't their long-term starter because they have Brett Beatty, one of their recent high draft picks, developing in the minors. So this wouldn't even be an unrealistic trade target if you're trying to make your franchise based on realism. J.D. Davis developed into a machine in both of the simulations I did. Here in the 5-year simulation, he just developed into a well-rounded, all-around offensive player. The numbers aren't necessarily going to wow you. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who can develop into somebody who consistently hits 300 for 35 home runs, but he's really good. Here in the 7-year simulation, he actually did hit at least 300 in 3 of the 7 seasons. So if you can develop that contact, great. If not, he can just be a consistent number 2 or number 5 hitter in your lineup. Maybe not the star of your order, but somebody who's going to be very reliable and will be a consistent starter. We did have to trade away a couple good players here with Sheldon Neuse and Gabriel Maciel, but again, it's really not that big of a deal if you're getting a talented third baseman who develops into a really consistent part of the lineup. So we're going to make that trade there with the Mets and add J.D. Davis to the team. Shortstop was one of the harder positions for me to find. I ended up sitting on Jorge Polanco. I tried to avoid players who were as good as Jorge Polanco, but there weren't really any other great options, and Polanco develops into a stud in MLB the Show simulation. And with the Twins signing Carlos Correa, again, if you're trying to be realistic, you can definitely rationalize getting Polanco. I believe he is the oldest player on this list, so he does start to regress a little bit quicker than the other guys. But here in the 5-year simulation, he's not regressing at all. In the previous season, he hit 325 with an OPS around 900. His power numbers are usually pretty good, generally hits around 20-ish home runs per season. Here in the 7-year simulation, he's really starting to get worse. But look at 2023, 33 home runs, over 100 RBIs. You can have him for 5-6 years in your lineup, and he'll be a really, really good player. Considering he's an 81 overall, he's going to be a little bit harder to get, but we didn't have to trade that much for him. Elvis Andrus is an older player and is on a bad contract, and although Ryan Cusick is a pretty good pitching prospect, I think it's worth it to get a guy like Jorge Polanco, especially considering Cusick has a pretty low walks per 9, and as we discussed earlier, you need a good walks per 9 to be really good in the simulation of this game, so I wouldn't even count on Cusick being a long-term piece for you. At left field, we're going to go with Lamont Wade Jr. I know his numbers are a little bit staggered. He's a beast against righties and is a liability against lefties. But you have to keep in mind, a majority of the pitchers in Major League Baseball are righties. So more times than not, you're going to face off against a right-hander. Meeting Lamont Wade can be good for you for a good 120 games per season. In the 5-year simulation, he was really solid. He always hit over 20 home runs per season. For the most part, he hits for good average as well, and you can even develop him a little bit against lefties too. In the 7-year simulation, his numbers against lefties are no longer terrible, and all around his numbers are pretty solid. Kind of like J.D. Davis, I don't think you're ever going to get him to turn into a superstar, but he's not that highly rated. He's 28 years old already, so he's not that hard to go out and get. So we ended up trading 3 pretty players in order to acquire him. And again, maybe you don't play him against lefties too often, but he can start 120 games per season and have really, really good numbers because he mashes against right-handed pitchers. So I think Lamont Wade is certainly a player you guys should inquire about if you aren't opposed to having a guy who's not going to really play against lefties. Center field was another position that was kind of hard to find, and Sam Hilliard is not everybody's type because he can't really hit for contact at all, but he is an intriguing player because he hits dingers. He also has a very good arm as well. He's pretty much Walmart Joey Gallo, essentially. If you want somebody who can be reliable at the plate and doesn't strike out a lot, Sam Hilliard might not be your cup of tea. But if you want somebody who isn't going to hit for great average but has a lot of pop and walks often, then Sam Hilliard could be your guy. That's last season in the 5-year sim, he hit 43 home runs. And in the 7-year simulation, he wasn't too bad either. Obviously, his averages are pretty low, but again, don't expect him to be consistently hitting above 250 for you. If he does, that's great, but you're getting him for his defense, his ability to draw walks, and obviously his ability to hit dingers. Also, being 28 years old, he's not going to be that hard to get. So we traded a couple of pretty okay players, including Seth Brown, who's fine. But if you're getting someone like Hilliard, you don't really need Seth Brown. So that's why we're going to be willing to move on from him. So again, I understand that Sam Hilliard isn't everybody's type of player. I don't know if I would really want a guy like that on my team. But he gives you a lot of power, and he has some major strengths. The last player we're going to talk about is super under the radar, and that's Jalen Davis, who isn't even on the Giants' major league team. He's a 65 overall, he's 27 years old, but if you give him a chance on your major league team, he is going to be a beast. I don't know why he is so good in MLB the Show simulation, and he has been for years. In MLB the Show 21 and 20, he was great. So in the 5-year simulation I did, he was really never in the majors. He only played in 11 games. But as you'll see here, in the 7-year simulation, the Giants gave him a chance. Actually, not the Giants, but the other teams he was on gave him a chance, and he was fantastic. 2028 with the Orioles, 36 home runs, 261 average, OPS in the 800s. Had a great year in 2025 with the Reds. So if you get Jalen Davis and are willing to play him despite a fairly low rating, he is going to be really good. And only being 65 overall, see potential, he's not going to be that hard to get. He's actually going to be pretty easy. Maybe the easiest player on this list. And if he can develop, he's going to be one of the best players on this list. So Jalen Davis is a major sleeper and a major under the radar guy who I think you guys should go ahead and try and get. So that's going to conclude today's episode. I know this is a little bit different. I've never really done anything like this before, but let me know what you thought of that down below in the comments. If you want more videos like this, maybe I'll do a top 10 prospects you should go out and trade for. Make sure to hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more MLB the Show 22 franchise content. Peace out, everybody.